Hello everybody. A viewer asked me to debunk a video from this creationist called John Andelin. Let's have a look. This is the man in question. He has a medical degree and works as a pathologist and is also an accomplished sculptor.
In this presentation, I'm going to demonstrate that the modern theory of evolution, as is propagated today, is not a legitimate scientific proposal. And this is because the theory of evolution has been universally shielded from scientific falsification.
So that's a fairly bold claim from the outset. Either he's a genius who knows far more than anybody else about evolution, or he's just going to spout creationist nonsense.
Dr. Karl Popper, who is one of the most distinguished philosophers of science of the 20th century, stated that in order for a theory to be considered scientific, it had to be falsifiable.
And it is this process of falsifiability which strengthens evolution. Remember, a scientific theory cannot be proven outright. It can only be failed to be disproven.
Now, this is a standard of scientific thinking that is universally accepted. However, the opposite approach is employed in the halls of academia when it comes to evolution. Generally, evolution is taught with very simplistic examples, and barriers that cannot be explained are ignored or glossed over.
This is total nonsense. Evolution is taught at a basic level in schools to introduce pupils to the subject, but in academia in universities, nothing is glossed over and all areas are accessible for research.
Now, Charles Darwin understood the importance of skepticism in science, and in his book, Origin of Species, he provided several challenges in which his theory could be falsified. And here are some of the challenges he discussed.
Before we look at his explanation, let's look at what could disprove evolution given our current knowledge of evolution and genetics.
The fossil record. Darwin noted that the fossil record did not sustain the predictions of evolution and expressed the hope that future findings would.
And that has been the case. We have found many fossils since Darwin's time showing changes in their morphology at varying rates. Even at the Cambrian expansion, we can trace through the fossil record the development of animal body plans from the earlier Ediacaran era.
Irreducible complexity. Charles Darwin stated that if a system could be demonstrated that could not have been achieved through numerous successive slight modifications, his theory would be disproven.
And that has not happened, as no irreducibly complex organ or system has been demonstrated. Irreducible complexity is Michael Behe's favourite argument, and that was completely debunked in this video by Professor Dave, which I will link in the description. Even Behe's favourite example of supposed irreducible complexity, which is the bacterial flagellum, has been shown to not be irreducibly complex and can evolve again in the right circumstances.
Biologic altruism. Darwin challenged skeptics to find an example in nature of a complexity of one species that existed exclusively for the benefit of another, and this could disprove evolution.
We see biological altruism. Putting aside humans for the moment, animals engage in altruism for mutual benefit and kin selection. Cleaner fish eat parasites from the mouths of other fish, which then benefit from the removal of these parasites. Animals also hunt in packs. No species acts for the exclusive good of another species.
And beauty for the sake of beauty. Darwin recognized that the elaborate beauty manifested in some species posed a serious challenge to evolution and could potentially overthrow it.
What we may perceive as beauty has not been created for our benefit. The costly display of a peacock is selected for by sexual selection when peahens are attracted to males with greater plumage.
Nevertheless, these challenges that Darwin made have been universally swept under the rug. Instead, only a few challenges are admitted, and none of these are scientific. According to modern thinking, it's impossible to falsify evolution.
Wrong. Any of these would falsify evolution.
And if you doubt what I'm saying, Ask an evolutionary biologist to provide you a way in which evolution could be falsified. You won't be given scientific challenges. Look at what's published in Wikipedia on the subject. Evolution could be falsified by many conceivable lines of evidence, such as the fossil record showing no change over time, confirmation that mutations are prevented from accumulating in a population, or observations of organisms being created supernaturally or spontaneously. Look at these. None of these are scientific challenges.
Let's look at each one in turn. If we see a jumble of species throughout different layers of the fossil record, instead of a gradual change, that would be evidence against evolution. If we see changes in species over time, but do not see mutations being transmitted, that would be evidence against evolution, as it would disprove the mechanism. If we see organisms being created supernaturally or spontaneously, then we would have an alternative mechanism for the creation of new species. None of this has happened.
Now, another common challenge you might hear is to demonstrate a true chimera, and that is an organism with combined parts of two different lineages. For example, Richard Dawkins argued in one of his books that the absence of feathers in bats is evidence of the lack of an intelligent designer. Now, actually, this challenge of different lineages in one organism has been met by the observation of monotremes, such as the platypus, and these have features of both reptiles and mammals. However, this is not sufficient in the eyes of many evolutionists.
The platypus is not a chimera of mammals and reptiles. It is a species of monotremes, which are egg-laying mammals. The monotremes are survivors of an earlier branch of the mammal tree, and later branching led to the development of marsupials and placentals.
The popular website talkorigins.org demands that a chimera such as a mermaid or a centaur be necessary to falsify evolution on that basis. In other words, they demand that something like a mythologic creature which is scientifically illogical be identified to prove the lack of an intelligent designer.
Not necessarily, but such a chimera that would not fit into any evolutionary pattern or tree would be evidence against evolution.
Now, since Darwin, other possible ways to falsify evolution have become evidence, since we have a better understanding of the true nature of inheritance, and I'm going to present these for your consideration. Now, each one of these challenges has been met, and therefore evolution has been falsified on multiple levels. First, mathematical demonstration that the necessary mutations to result in a line of descent could not have randomly appeared. I'll refer you to an article I published which demonstrates that the eye could not have evolved through random mutations.
So this is his own article which he published in the Journal of Applied Mathematics and Physics. This is part of a recent trend among creationists to try and bamboozle the viewer with astronomical looking odds to make it look like that it is mathematically impossible for evolution to occur. What they do not seem to pick up is that evolution has selection. You do not need all mutations to happen at once. As soon as there is a survival benefit, then those mutations would be selected for. Take the example of these die. If you want them to show sixes, you don't have to throw all 5 of them repeatedly until they all show a 6. As soon as one shows a 6, you could keep it there and throw the others until one by one they start to show a 6. Jackson Wheat has done a 4-video series on solving mathematical challenges to evolution. I will link the first one in the description.
Next point, irreducible complexity. This refers to an organic system composed of integrated parts where each part is necessary for the overall functioning of the system. Now, an excellent example of this is single-cell life, which requires multiple complex structures to function and could not be viable without all the structures present. For example, DNA requires enzymes to be formed, and enzymes cannot be formed without DNA.
What actually happens is that both DNA and enzymes start together as very basic forms and then increase in complexity with evolution.
Non-functional intermediate forms. An excellent example of this is the proposed evolution of flying reptiles. Any intermediate species with a gradually evolving elongated fourth digit would have been non-functional.
That's complete nonsense. Flying evolved through the evolution of the wing. Each successive step produced an incremental benefit to survival and was therefore selected by natural selection.
Now, the next point, biologic altruism. A good example of biologic altruism is the existence of hundreds of medicinal plants. For example, the foxglove plant produces digitalis, which has saved the lives of thousands of heart patients. Digitalis has a direct effect on heart muscle to increase contractility. Now, there is a very simplistic explanation that is given as to how this evolved. You might be told that digitalis is poisonous to animals and therefore beneficial to the plant. But this begs the question, how did such a complex molecule happen to evolve by gradualistic changes through random mutations? Now, if this example doesn't convince you, consider the fact that there are hundreds of plants that produce medicinal substances that benefit man in complex ways, and while the substances themselves are of no direct benefit to the plant.
They are of benefit to the plants. This is not altruism, as the plant is not improving its survival by offering digitalis as a medicine. Digitalis has a narrow therapeutic index and can cause serious side effects if the dose is not correct. It's evolved not to become a medicine for humans, but as a poison for any animal that was trying to eat the plant. This gave the plant a survival advantage. A weaker form of digitalis would have evolved, then natural selection would have favoured the development of more toxic forms if it gave the plant a greater survival advantage.
And then the next challenge, beauty for beauty's sake. If you've ever had the chance to visit a tropical coral reef environment, try to imagine functional reproductive advantages of the elaborate color patterns of coral reef fishes. There are none, and attempts to explain these patterns in terms of reproductive advantages are futile.
So they are futile just because you say so. Actually, the biologist Konrad Lorenz discovered that coral fish are conspicuously coloured to help them identify their own species in the crowded reef environment. They're not colourful just so that we can look at them.
And finally, functionality that exceeds need. A good example of this is the higher intelligence of man. Why is it that you can take a child from a Stone Age tribe in New Guinea and raise him in a Western culture, and his ability to understand poetry and quantum mechanics is equal to that of any other person on Earth?
What is the advantage to humans of having mathematical understanding? Why would natural selection? You pointed out that mathematicians don't seem to be particularly, I don't know why you say that, particularly good at attracting mates. So what is the biological advantage of having a mathematical brain? I share your puzzlement, but it's not just mathematics. It's also poetry, it's music, it's art, it's all kinds of things which clearly separate humans off from all other animals and seem to separate humans off from all, at least naive interpretations of Darwinism. Now, my own rather lame attempt to understand this is to say that something about natural selection gave us big brains. The big brains were originally useful for survival and for mating, and it was a byproduct, an unforeseeable byproduct, that the big brains also happened to be good at mathematics, poetry, music, etc. An analogy which I do find fairly convincing is with a computer. Computers were originally designed as calculating machines, automated, programmable calculating machines. And once you've got an automated, programmable calculating machine, you suddenly find that whether you like it or not, you've also got a word processor, a chess-playing machine, a simulating machine. You've got a versatile machine whose versatility wasn't originally planned, but which was inevitable in the manufacture of a calculating machine. I think the same is true of brains. Once you've got a brain that's become so big, for good survival reasons, once it's gone beyond a certain threshold of size for survival, then automatically it becomes capable of doing formal logic and mathematics and poetry.
So in summary, this is a rather amateurish anti-evolution video full of already debunked creationist points. Thank you for watching, and please let me know what you think in the comments section.